Excuse me, madam. We're investigating the murder of Oswald Mason, and we understand your company may be involved in an audit that...
Stop right there. You may save your breath. Our solicitors have advised us not to speak to anyone regarding this audit matter, so mum's the word.
Yeah, but I merely wanted to know...
I said you can save your breath, sir.
I just can't imagine why anyone would want to do such a thing. Oswald Mason was so well liked by all of his fellow workers here at the bank.
How long was he employed here, Mr. Kimball?
More than 15 years. He'd always been one of our most trusted employees.
What do you know about his work with the Treasury?
Very little. One of our responsibilities is to oversee government audits. This was Oswald's area of responsibility. This work is highly confidential. I only know that he was working for the Chancellor of the Exchequer. You'll have to talk to the Governor, Lionel Foxcroft, if you have questions about this. I'm sorry, that's all I know.
May we examine his office?
I suppose that would be acceptable. I am planning to have his secretary, Mrs. Mabel Brown, sort through his papers, but under the circumstances, I gave her the day off.
Here's Mr. Mason's bank statement. It appears that on April 4th he drew a personal cheque for £240.
Look, Holmes, passages for 2 to Greece from Aberdeen Navigation, purchased the 28th of March. Oh, and here's another receipt from Evenson and Company gift shop for 2 statues, dated the 31st.
Here's a bill from the Langham Hotel for £3.06.
What do you suppose we're to make of all of this, Holmes?
I'm not yet sure, Watson.
She's not in, Governor.
I can see that, Mr. Kent. What a sight. What a pity to see so many lovely ladies turned to fragments and dust. The British Museum.
Well, she might be a bit untidy, but she is a woman of culture, she is.
Yes, I can see that. Do you know where I could find Miss Blue?
Left about 20 minutes ago with a young gent. In quite a hurry, I'd say. I was loading their luggage in the four-wheeler, and I heard the bloke tell the cabbie to head over to Waterloo Station.
Thanks, Alfie. Much obliged. Perhaps I'll hold on to these for evidence. Excuse me. I'm eager to see one of your Venus de Milo statues.
So sorry, sir. We sold out of them yesterday.
Do you have the names of the customers?
It was just one woman. She bought all 5. Said her name was Mrs. Smith. I am certain I've seen her on stage before, although not under that name. For the life of me, I can't remember what her real name is.
How can I help you, gentlemen?
We understand you were informed of Mr. Mason's death.
Yes. Mr. Kimball gave me the bad news this morning.
Can you think of any reason why anyone would want to murder Mr. Mason?
Oh, no. He was such a nice man. He was tremendously well liked by everyone at work. And he and Mrs. Mason have been so very kind to me ever since my husband died at sea 3 years ago. Why, they've almost been like a family to me. Last week for my birthday, they gave me a lovely little statue. Oh.
There, Mrs. Brown.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking about when I came home from work late last night. My little birthday statue had fallen onto the floor and was broken into bits. It was almost as if it was an omen.
Perhaps we should go, Holmes.
Good thinking, Watson.
I'm sorry, gentlemen. It's just that this is all so very difficult.
You told us quite enough, Mrs. Brown. We'll just show ourselves out.
Stiff upper lip.
Slow as me sister last night. Didn't pick up anyone matching that description, Governor. Did pick up a fancy-looking lady, had a famous look about her.
Oh, and who was she?
Not sure where I'd seen her before. She was off to a party of some sort. Dainty young thing, and a fine tipper too.
I will never forget that dreadful day. Well, it only took 15 minutes and the diamonds were gone. We still haven't recovered from the loss.
Weren't you insured?
Oh,
Yes, of course, but no amount of money can replace the loss of these particular gems. I mean, each one possessed a soul of its own. They were a masterpiece of nature. When those three men took them, I am quite certain they didn't know that they were stealing a piece of my soul as well.
How terribly sad. You mentioned 3 men, Mrs. Nibbs. Who other than Cook was involved?
Oh, if I only knew. You see, they were wearing masks at the time, so I couldn't tell. But I don't miss a thing, Dr. Watson. I was able to identify Cook because he removed his mask as he exited the shop. Oh, there were other suspects. Friends of Cook, but no one was ever found. And as long as Cook remains mum, the others remain free.
I'm sorry, but Mr. Dixon is in conference. May I be of service?
Indeed you may. We understand that Mr. Dixon has been retained in the case of Bacon and Company, and we would like to know when it might be convenient to ask him a few questions.
Never. We have nothing to say regarding that matter. Now I must ask you to leave. Good day.
What do you know of the Mason case, Ellis?
Oh, the accountant chap, right. And some of the fellows in the office here were gabbing about some work he was doing for the government.
Did they believe it was related to his death?
Not at all. Evidently, he wasn't working on anything worth killing him over. It was only some paperwork that any other accountant could do if Mason died.
Mr. Essex, I understand Mr. Oswald Mason was working on an audit of Bacon and Company at the time of his death, and I would like to ask you a few questions about your company.
I don't have anything to say to you. You can take your questions to my barrister, Charles Dixon. Please leave.
We're investigating the murder of Mr. Oswald Mason.
I can assure you, you'll not find any murderers here, sir.
Good heavens, if it were only that simple. No, you see, among Mr. Mason's papers was a receipt from this shop dated 31 March. Do you have a record of what he purchased?
Well, let me see. Ah, here you are. Well, the man did have a sense of the popular. He purchased 2 Venus de Milo statues. It appears we delivered them both for him.
Might you tell me where they were sent?
One to Rose Mason at his home address. The other to a Mabel Brown on Tottenham. Oh, do you suppose he was having a dalliance?
This time I'm not supposing anything. By the way, I do so adore the Venus de Milo. I might be interested in purchasing one of my own.
Sorry, haven't a one. Sold the last 3 to another gentleman on Wednesday.
Pity.
Perhaps I can get more from the manufacturer.
Who might that be?
J. Small and Company. Have you heard of them?
The name does sound familiar, but I'm not sure. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Billingsley. Good day. We're terribly sorry about your loss, Mrs. Mason.
There, dear sister.
We know this may be difficult, but we need to hear about last night's events if we're to catch your husband's killer.
Yes, I know. Well, I was here last night for her weekly whist game.
She comes every Thursday.
Oswald stayed home and worked on some papers from the office.
The man had been working very hard lately.
Was he expecting visitors while you were gone?
No, I don't think so. I returned home at 10 o'clock and went into the study and... You tell him, Dahlia.
The place was in shambles. Furniture overturned, books strewn about, and in the middle of it all was my poor Oswald.
Ghastly. Who could possibly have wanted to hurt him?
I can't imagine. He was the dearest man in all the world. Why, only last week he bought me a Venus de Milo replica for our anniversary and promised me a special trip. I imagine it was Paris because we went there on a honeymoon where we saw the original Venus. When I saw that statue broken into pieces,
I think that's quite enough for one day, Dr. Watson.
Of course.
I understand you're looking into Oswald's death.
Yes, and I'd be interested to know who you think killed him.
I haven't the foggiest notion. He was a nice man, and I can't imagine anyone who would want to murder him.
I understand Mr. Mason was working on a special assignment at the Treasury.
Yes.
Do you suppose there's any connection to be found there?
Not likely. Very few people were even aware of Mason's involvement in the investigation.
Who were they?
To my knowledge, there were only 2, Sir Adrian Momquist of the Treasury and myself.
What was Mason working on?
It's rather complicated. To understand what was involved, you must understand that the history of the bank financially is, for all intents and purposes, nothing more than the history of the bank rate. And that's what this whole investigation is concerned with. Since the Bank Act of 1844...
Pardon me, Mr. Foxcroft. I do believe that's all we need to know. You have, however, been most informative.
So, you want to know about Violet Blue? For starters, I think you'll agree my voice has a much wider range than hers.
Yes, that's lovely, Miss Gamble, but I'm not a booking agent, I'm a detective. I'm here to find out what you know of Miss Blue's history.
Yes, of course. Well, Violet and I were roommates. She was looking for someone to share her lodgings. You see, her fiancé had been arrested, and she took it quite hard. And then her career took off, and she got me the job as an understudy in this review. I just know it will be my big break.
I do hope she's not too ill.
Ill? Heavens, no. Her fiancé just got out of Millbank Prison 2 days ago, and she wanted to spend some time with him. Oh, dear. Perhaps I shouldn't have said that. She told the manager she was ill. Oh, you won't repeat that, will you?
Your secret is safe with me, madam. By the way, what was the name of Miss Blue's fiancé?
Errol Hogg.
They called themselves the Three Musketeers. Johnny Small, Leroy Eakin, and Nat Cook. We used to think of them as petty criminals. No one took them seriously until a few major robberies 3 or 4 years ago. They were among the prime suspects, but there was insufficient evidence for a conviction or even an arrest. Then Cook was caught in a jewel heist, and the gang broke up.
What of the others?
I haven't seen either one of them since.
Speaking of mysteries, what are you and Holmes working on?
The murder of Oswald Mason.
Don't know a thing about it. Let me know if I should look into it.
Will do, Quinn. I'm investigating the murder of Mr. Oswald Mason.
What a tragic ending to such a noble life. You know, he often rented our conference rooms for his business meetings.
Oh, I see.
Mrs. Small, we are interested in obtaining information about the Venus de Milo statues that your company manufactures.
I must say, that certainly has become quite a popular item lately.
We understand they're smashing.
That is precisely what a nice gentleman said when he came in on Wednesday. He didn't mention his name, but he did say that he had a shop in Southampton. He purchased our last 5 and wanted to know where he could get more. I told him the rest had been sold to other shops. He wanted their names, and so I gave them to him.
And who might they be? I wouldn't mind picking up one myself. I've always admired the Venus de Milo.
Evenson and Company, and the gift shop at the British Museum.
How long have you manufactured these particular statues?
My late husband made up 15 of them 3 years ago, but he refused to sell them.
Late? So sorry. When did he die?
A fortnight ago.
Oh, my.
Don't lose any sleep over it, gentlemen. My husband was not a very reputable man. The only person who probably truly missed him after his death was the barman at the Red Bull Inn.
I still don't understand what possessed the Exchequer to bring you in on this investigation. We've got it all under control.
As always, I'm sure you do. So, Inspector, what happened as you see it?
Typical breaking and entering. Entry was made through an upstairs bedroom window, which was forced open. Then, thinking that the house was empty, the intruder made his way downstairs. He opened the study door and came face to face with Mr. Mason. A fight ensued which resulted in Mason's death, and the murderer fled through the study window.
Was anything taken?
Nothing. The jewelry and heirlooms all accounted for.
What about the government papers Mason was working on that night?
We sent them to the Treasury. They're all accounted for as well.
Well, I'm curious to know your theory as to a motive for the crime, Inspector.
Motive? Well, we haven't quite got there yet, but I'll let you know just as soon as we discover it.
Venus de Milo is probably the most admired of all surviving sculptural works of antiquity. Oh, I heartily agree.
Read on.
Of course. Experts generally agree it is a Greek marble from the 4th or 5th century BC. Found on the island of Milos in 1820, it was taken by the French ambassador to Constantinople and eventually presented to the Louvre by Louis XVIII. It remains there to this day. Oh, it would be a thrill to see it, wouldn't it, Holmes?
Perhaps. Standing guard, Constable Parks?
Yes, sir, Mr. Holmes. Waiting for the yard to make its final inspection, so I'm making certain everything stays just the way I found it last night.
Where was the body found?
Sprawled across the desk it was. You can see the blood stain on the top. The blighter put up quite a fight, I must say.
How was he killed?
Head was bashed in by a statue.
Is there any indication how the murderer got in?
Looks like the upstairs window. It showed signs of forced entry.
And it appears that this is where he exited. There's a palm print and plaster residue.
Yes, and there are pieces of plaster shards in a pile on the floor. Was it you who found the body, Constable?
No, it was his wife. She came home from her sister's and that's when she found him. I was on my nightly rounds and heard her screaming. Then I came in and I saw this mess. I covered up the stiff and promptly had him sent over to Bart's. Then I gathered up the man's papers and took them to the yard.
What about the murder weapon?
Oh, yes. I had that sent over to Murray at the lab.
Where is Mrs. Mason now?
She was taken to her sister Dahlia's. Dahlia Farmer.
Well, look who's here. The only doctor in London who may know more about murder than I. Who is it this time, Watson?
Mr. Oswald Mason.
Did in this morning, right after my first cup of tea. His body arrived at the hospital at midnight, 11 April. He was in his early 40s and in very good health. Or should I say in very good health, but also very dead.
An unfortunate combination, to be sure.
I've always thought so. The fellow's death was caused by a blow to the side of his head by a heavy blunt object, and under his fingernails I discovered blood of a different type than his own. Looks like he put up a fight. Nothing very exciting or informative, I'm afraid.
I'm sorry, but Nat Cook doesn't wish to see you. I hope you understand, but I can't force him.
That's quite all right. I wouldn't care to be responsible for causing the upset of a hardened criminal. Perhaps you can tell me a bit about him.
Nat Cook hasn't been a spot of trouble since he's been here. Keeps to himself, really. But it must make prison life a lot easier to take, knowing you've got £100,000 worth of diamonds waiting for you on the outside.
However did he come upon such incredible wealth?
The Vries Diamond robbery.
Oh, yes, I recall. They were never recovered. Do you suppose he confided their whereabouts to anyone?
Well, like I said, he didn't talk much. The only confidant he ever had was his cellmate, who was released on Monday.
And who might that be?
A fellow by the name of Errol Hogg. And you should have seen the lady friend he left with. Got all the guards' knickers in a knot, she did. Acted like they'd never seen a woman before. But she was a looker. And I heard tell she could sing like an angel.
Excuse me, Mr. Murray.
Ah, Whitson, what can I do for you?
It's Watson, sir.
I don't believe I've ever worked on a case by the name of Watson.
No, I mean the name... Never mind. Well, then what about the Mason murder?
Mason, I know. It looks like he was killed by David.
David? You mean you know the murderer?
No, not the murderer. The murder weapon. This is David. It's a copy of a very early Michelangelo. You can see the blood stains here. I believe this was one of two statues on the fireplace mantel. Apparently, the intruder grabbed this one and killed Mason in the struggle. It's a handsome piece, isn't it?
Here's the file you requested. Once again, you've beaten Scotland Yard to the punch. I haven't seen them around here for weeks.
Jonathan Small, convicted of selling stolen goods in 1880, served 6-month prison term. Cited on public drunkenness and disturbing the peace in 1885, 1886, and twice in 1882. Suspect in Drummond Bank robbery, 1886, along with Leroy Eakin, not brought to trial. Suspect in a diamond robbery in 1887, along with Nat Cook. Not enough evidence to bring Small to trial. Cook was convicted of the crime and is awaiting release from Millbank Prison.
So it's Violet Blue you're looking for? Cool, what a beauty. I've always considered her to be the eighth wonder of the world. Are you a fan?
Not yet, but I thought I might catch her on stage tonight.
I'm afraid you're out of luck. She was ill yesterday and won't be in tonight either. Sandra Gamble's on stage in her place. Of course, she don't have quite the vocal range that Violette has, but I think you'll agree she's a real fetcher. You ought to catch the act.
Oh, thank you. If I can't find a good book to pick up tonight, then perhaps I will.
Oswald and Rose Mason were, how do I put it delicately, the most boring couple in London. Mrs. Mason was a thoroughly mediocre whist player, and Oswald rarely showed his face at social functions. In that regard, we should count ourselves fortunate. He was a dismal conversationalist and laughed at all the wrong jokes. I can't imagine the man inspiring anyone to murder.
Oh, Holmes, my man, how's the world treating you?
Just fine, Porky, just fine, but it hasn't treated a man named Oswald Mason at all well. He was murdered last night. Have you heard anything about it?
Not a whisper. Must not have involved any of the chaps what hang about here.
Johnny Small. I guess there's no harm in talking about him now. Oh, he was a wild one, he was. No surprise that he came to such a violent end. I've always wondered where he came up with the money for that ceramic shop of his. There were tales about the Drummond Bank robbery and other heists. But I tell you, I don't know much about that. I do know that Johnny wasn't always on the right side of the law. But he was a good bloke. He took care of his mates. The word on the street is that his wife did him in with poison.
Oswald Mason purchased 2 tickets on the Grecian Queen, departing April 21st, bound for Athens. Sounds like a lovely trip, doesn't it?
Without a doubt.
Perhaps someday I'll take it myself.
Be careful, Ducky. Don't be tracking dirt into me house.
Believe me, madam, I wouldn't dare. I'm here because I understand Mrs. Small is one of your tenants.
She is indeed, but she's over to a shop right now. Ever since her no-good husband's dead, she's taking care of the business. Not that salt would help her in the first place. He was always coming home drunk, beating on her, after spending all his time down at the pub with those bums, while she took care of everything.
The clerk says if we're to find anything out about the Bacon and Company audit, we must speak to Sir Adrian Malmquist at the Treasury.
Well, let's not tarry, Watson. Sir Adrian, we are investigating the murder of Oswald Mason.
Capable fellow. Bloody inconvenient, this murder.
Inconvenient?
Mason was to have a report for me, dealing with some rather embarrassing irregularities.
Do you feel that his death might have anything to do with his work here at the Treasury?
Well, the investigation was dealing with some rather large sums of money. But a murder, it doesn't make any sense. It won't stop the investigation, only delay it. Besides, all of Mason's papers were accounted for.
What was the nature of Mr. Mason's investigation?
Well, as you know, the Exchequer is responsible for the financial well-being of the empire. We've relied on Bacon and Company to handle many of our investments. Do you know them?
They are one of the largest investment houses in London.
Yes. And 6 months ago, it came to our attention that they are in deep financial straits. They are not in possession of sufficient liquid assets to meet their current liabilities. They had invested in too many securities that were weighing down the London stock market. So, Her Majesty's government and Lionel Foxcroft, the governor of the Bank of England, guaranteed to cover the discredited securities. But when we audited their books, we discovered they had invested in far more securities than they were reporting. Over £1,300,000 worth.
So Mr. Mason was attempting to trace the additional securities?
Exactly.
Have you any idea who is doing the embezzling?
There's little doubt that Bacon and Company's directors, Michael Essex and Mitchell York, were hoping to profit while England slept.
Oh,
Top of the morning to you.
Good morning, Constable Parks. I'm looking for this woman.
Violet Blue. What a lady. I've seen her perform almost every Saturday night for a year. In fact, she just left on a train with a gentleman. You can't imagine what a thrill it was to see her.
Do you know where the train was headed?
I couldn't tell you, Mr. Holmes. You know, I had no idea you were as much of a fan as I.
Oh, Kitty, you just missed him. Mr. York went to France today. He's on holiday.